from you. And now I will have Dr. Sean Evans, the professor of biology from FIU, on behalf of the Dumont Conservancy, will be introducing Dr. Benjamin Beck.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's a great pleasure to be here, especially introducing such a wonderful person as Dr. Benjamin Beck. He is an academic. He has done wonderful things for conservation and reintroduction, some of which you're going to hear now. He is a CV that is just jammed full of publications. I haven't had time to digest them all yet. He's the author of several books, some of them scientific, and 2 novels. And I particularly am impressed by the Golden Lion Tamarin reintroduction program in Brazil, which Dr. Beck played a pivotal role. I think, Dr. Beck, knowing your slides, that you can probably introduce the rest of it to the audience.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. The reintroduction of Golden Lion tamarin started in 1983, and we have written a lot of scientific papers about how it worked and what the outcomes were, but there's a backstory that I was never able to tell to a scientific audience in a scientific paper. And I felt obligated, for reasons that you'll learn, to tell that backstory. Not only is it fun, but I had a debt to acknowledge. So that's what we're going to do tonight. The Golden Lion tamarin is a 1-pound monkey that is native to the Atlantic coastal rainforest of Brazil. The Atlantic coastal rainforest, where Golden Lion tamarins occur, is really a suburb of Rio de Janeiro, the huge, thriving city. Rio de Janeiro is that purple area on the lower left, the city itself, which kind of crawls around a big bay that commutes to the Atlantic Ocean. And up there in red and green and light blue is the area where the Golden Lion tamarins live and have lived for a number of years. That's only 50 miles away. So we're working in a suburb of Rio de Janeiro. And until the 1960s, it was very hazardous to go from the city of Rio up to that area because of malaria. You had to go around that bay, and there was a malaria area. I love that phrase. This doesn't work very well. But, whoops, in 1960, in the 1960s, the Brazilian government built a bridge across that bay. And people were able to easily leave Rio de Janeiro for a weekend of vacationing, and there was a lot of commercial traffic. And the effects are visible in the next 3 slides. The red areas are disturbed habitat, the green areas are forest. This is the way it looked in what's the date on there? 80. And a little bit later, 1990, and 2002. So you can see that this increased traffic resulted in a lot of deforestation in the Golden Lion tamarin area of occurrence. But notice above that blue area, which is a reservoir, there's still a lot of green. And that's where our program was focused in 1983. And I'd like to be able to say that we had some role in slowing down the deforestation in that area. What caused the deforestation, or habitat conversion as it's known, is timber exportation originally, and then the use of wood for fuel in Brazil until 1990s. It even fueled factories. There was also cattle farming, coffee raising, and later citrus. Sorry, this is a little fussy. As the forest was disturbed and the areas opened up, the area became very susceptible to fire. And farmers set fires in their fields to clear them and to move the forest back, to continually eat away at the forest to make more room for crops and cows. Well, I'm doing this two at a time. There was also a lot of poaching going on in the 1970s and 1980s, which depleted these forests, what was left of golden lion tamarins and other animals. So if you combine poaching, habitat conversion, and fire, just about destroyed the golden lion tamarin. By 1983, there were 150 left in the wild. That's critically endangered. And furthermore, they lived not in a continuous block of forest, but in a series of forest fragments or forest islands. Threats still continue today. Urbanization and what we call linear infrastructure, the construction of highways, pipelines, and power lines between the city of Rio and the Northeast. A little bit about golden lion tamarins. They, as we told you, they're about the size of a squirrel. They're monogamous. They live in family groups with one adult male, one adult female. Sometimes a brother of the breeding male will also live in the group. They typically have twins, and they are very territorial. They live in large territories for their body size especially. They have twins, and the father helps carry the twins and provide their first solid food. If there are older siblings around, they too will participate. We call this cooperative infant care. They eat anything that can't eat them. They are omnivorous. They will eat fruit, reptiles, amphibians, and insects, and spiders. So their favorites, of course, are grasshopper-like animals and tree frogs, but they also like fruit. So they have a very varied diet. But the food is widely distributed in a big territory. They like to sleep in tree holes or in vine tangles, and they have favorite sites which they reuse, about 20 or 25 distributed around this territory, but they never use a site 2 nights in a row because that could begin to attract predators. So they need to know this big territory. They need to have a geographical map in their head. They need to know where the sleeping sites are and where the good feeding sites are. Very challenging. Well, we had 150 in the wild in 1983, but there were 350 in zoos. And the population in zoos was growing. So the idea came up, why don't we take some from zoos and take them back to Brazil and reintroduce them in some of these forests where the species has been exterminated by hunting and poaching. Great idea. But what we realized very quickly is that an animal that is bred and grown up in a zoo is going to have, quote, deficiencies in their behavior that will make it difficult for them to adapt to the wild. You can imagine what they might be: finding food, finding shelter, avoiding predators. Those things don't exist. Those challenges don't exist in zoos. Okay, well, we jumped to again. So we began a program of training zoos, training the tamarins in zoos to, for example, search for food. In a zoo, you sit around and you wait for your food. Nice people bring the food a couple times a day in a pan, nicely cut up. Even the crickets are chilled so they can't fly away too fast. So what we did was we tried to break those habits, and we hid food all around their enclosure every day in different places, and created the expectation for them that they had to search for it, that they had to get out there and look, that a strategy of waiting was not effective. So we distributed the food and we hid it in all sorts of little puzzle boxes. We fed them whole fruit. Now, fruit doesn't come cut up in the wild. When we first gave a tamarin a papaya, they had no idea that it needed to be opened. My colleague, Beck, who's a co-author on this paper, was a zookeeper. And she said, oh, I know how to fix that. She cut a little hole in the papaya and put some jam in it. And they started licking the jam, and then they got into the papaya, and they learned how to eat whole fruits. But you can imagine how concerning it was to have to teach a monkey to eat a banana, a whole banana. They'd never seen it. They had to deal with live prey, some of which was big enough to hurt them. So we gave them a lot of experience in the zoo and in their quarantine in Brazil with big insects. We also made the mistake of feeding one a toad, which almost killed her. And we tried to physically enrich them to get them strong. We sent them to the gym. We made them hang and jump and put them on, in later examples, naturalistic branches. How do you teach predator recognition in a zoo? We can't release a snake in their cage. So we put snakes in little cages within the big cage. We had a stuffed owl. We wanted to give them some experience. Well, what we learned was that these tamarins approach a predator. They engage in a behavior called mobbing. If one of them sees a predator, they start to squawk and they all get around it, and that way everybody in the group is informed that there's a potential predator in the area. The trick is they've got to see the predator. And in the wild, these guys were not very attentive when we released them, and several were killed by coral snakes that you see right there, because they just didn't see the snake. We took them to Brazil after all of this wonderful training. We built big cages in the forest at the release site, crushed down the vegetation, built a big wood and wire frame cage to give them real experience in the forest. Well, look where they're sitting. They're not in the trees. They're on the wood frame of those cages. And it turned out that the biggest deficiency of zoo-born golden lion tamarins was their unwillingness or inability to go on naturalistic vegetation. And if you will not travel on naturalistic vegetation in the wild, you're not going to survive. Well, Beata, as a zookeeper, began to understand these deficiencies and the inadequacy of our pre-release training program. So she worked very hard to try to compensate for this. But when we finally released the first monkeys, they left that beautiful cage and they got instantly lost. They would be 15 feet away from the door to the cage, and they would stand in a tree and they could not figure out how to get back into that cage to get food. They ran up and down the same tree over and over and over again until we finally went and got them and put them back in the cage. We lived in the forest with the monkeys. We tented there, day and night. We worked with them, we watched them, but significantly, we did not feed them very much after they were released. The philosophy was, they got to make it or break it. That was our philosophy. We did our best training them beforehand, but we didn't feed them much, very much after that. And the outcome was dismal. The first monkeys, almost all of them died or disappeared. We had no idea where some of them went. Others died. They starved to death. They ate the wrong food. They got taken by predators. Well, ethically, we could not repeat that exercise. So I went back to the National Zoo and I explained my dilemma to my colleagues, and I said, you know, what I'd like to do is release some in the zoo. We had a nice woods in the zoo in Washington, D.C. And I was given permission to do that only after a lot of questions. Zoo people don't like to let animals out of cages. They like to keep animals in cages. So we released them in the zoo, and they thrived. They had a nest box, a familiar shelter, which they had used in their cage. They had their own social group. They got lots of food, and they began to spread out, travel through the zoo, visit the buffalo. They were all over the place, but they came back every night, and they thrived. So we thought, now we have the perfect form of pre-release training. We just release them in the zoo for a while before they go to Brazil, and they're going to learn everything they need to know to survive. So my emphasis was still on pre-release training, but this was a free-ranging experience, not training them in a cage, but allowing them to free range on zoo grounds. Very familiar, very similar to the sort of experience you can see at Monkey Jungle. Well, this is the growth of the reintroduced population. And you can see we did this free-ranging experience where the red arrow is, and look at the number of reintroduced tamarins start to increase. Aha! We had it. We had the perfect pre-release experience. Training. Well, Beata said, that's fine. You go ahead and and train your animals, but that's still not going to be adequate. What you need to do, if you're going to make this successful, is intensive post-release management. After you release them in Brazil, consider them still to be in a zoo. Feed them. Put radio collars on them so you can find them. Go find them if they get lost and bring them back to their shelter box. Give them water. Intensive post-release management, and we really ran, there's the radio collar on one of them. We ran a zoo in the wild. We even imported canned marmoset diet from the United States in order to give them a nutritious diet in the wild. Well, science isn't perfect, and Beata's post-release management program started at the same time as our free-ranging pre-release program. So it was bad science. We didn't know which was responsible for the sudden increase in success of the golden lion tamarins, the reintroduced golden lion tamarins. We didn't know. Until, after 20 years, I was able to do some statistics on the group. I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. It didn't matter what we did before release, very few of them survived for 2 years. 20 to 25% tops. And it didn't matter whether we just took them out of cages and dumped them in the forest, whether we did the structured training in the cages, or whether we did the free-ranging experience. If you put all that together, all those pre-release strategies together, and you look at minimal post-release management, you can see that only an average of 13% survived for 2 years. But look what happened with post-release management. Very successful. So that's the story that's never been told, that Beata's idea and her insistence as a zookeeper who understood the needs of individual animals was the key to the success of the reintroduction program. And I owed her telling her that story because I was the one you heard in Sean's introduction. I'm the one that always got the credit. And so I figured out, how can I do that? And I decided to write the novel. So that's what 13 Gold Monkeys is about. It's a lot more adventurous than that. And when you keep them alive for 2 years, well, I'm not going to get anywhere here. When you keep them alive for 2 years, they finally have babies. And lo and behold, the babies' survivorship, look at this. The babies, over 70% of them, were able to survive for 2 years. Now think about this. They're born to parents who don't know much about survival. And yet, they're the ones who really were responsible for the growth of that reintroduced population. We don't know why those wild-born GLTs have a much higher survival rate. We think there's something to do about early in life, the experience early in life, but we don't know. We reintroduced, in all, 146 zoo-born tamarins, 43 institutions, 8 countries, 3 continents. One of those was born at Monkey Jungle. The animal got a stud book number, 808. She was born at Monkey Jungle, was reintroduced, and she died 271 days after reintroduction, we think as a result of eating toxic fruit. Poisonous fruit. They don't learn about poisonous fruits in captivity. You're right. Yes? After 2 years, we terminated that. So they weren't getting much support at all. Well, today, we have 3,000 golden lion tamarins in the wild. Remember, we started with 150. And 1,000 of those are descendants of the 146 that we reintroduced from zoos. So the golden lion tamarin, we think, is, at least temporarily, out of peril as a result of this program. Whoop. And the story is called 13 Gold Monkeys. We encourage you to visit our website of the NGO in the United States, SaveTheLionTamarin.org. And our organization is called Save the Golden Lion Tamarin. And we're an organization that provides financial and technical assistance to an NGO in Brazil that does now all of the on-the-ground operations to continue to protect and conserve golden lion tamarins. Thank you. I think we probably have some time for questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is absolutely fascinating work, and I love the fact that someone of your ilk is presenting conservation work here to the community, so thank you.
Thank you.
In reintroducing this species, was there any observation of behavioral exchanges going on between the existing population? I know that these animals are territorial, but was there any observations of maybe learned behavior from the existing population to the introduced population?
What a terrific question. Thank you for that.
It's the line that makes me say.
Are you sharing? There were several cases in which a mate was lost in we ship a family down to Brazil, and maybe mom or dad would die on the trip or something like that, and we didn't have a mate for it. So we'd find a wild golden lion tamarin, and we'd put them together in a new area. And animals that were paired with experienced wild tamarins learned very quickly. So there was a lot of observation learning, social learning from an experienced mate. And we actually tell that story in the book. So, great question.
I'll buy the book, I'll read the book, but I didn't mean to cut to the chase on that.
Listen, great question.
So was that behavior transferred or observed by the researchers transferred to the new generation?
Yes. Well,
Helped bring the survival rate up?
in the case of the ones that were really good, that learned well and were traveling well, yes, the younger ones probably learned in part by social learning. But we also had babies being born to zoo-born tamarins that were not very successful. If it weren't for our provisioning, they wouldn't have made it. They were klutzes. And yet the babies did great. The babies figured it out. And it was interesting because I was talking to a woman today who studies immigration, human immigration. And she said that what they're noticing with immigrants is if an immigrant arrives as a youngster, either, an infant, they adjust, no matter what the culture, they adjust much more effectively to that culture and to that language than an older individual. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. They're adjusting to a new environment. The infants are adjusting to a new environment much more successfully.
So would that be maybe likened to, because Noam Chomsky, as a linguist, talks about this crucial 7 linguistic years of learning a language. If you have not learned it within that 7 years, then you will have a more difficult time learning.
I'm out of my territory of excellence here. I don't know much, but you're right on. I think there are critical periods early in life for learning a lot of these survival skills. And the zoo-born animals have missed that period to learn about the wild, but the youngsters are right there. So great question and good insight.
Great answer.
Frank.
Ben, do you want to give a couple anecdotes in the book about either the politics or the people of working outside of Rio?
I don't want to give away the story, but the climax is this: we had monkeys stolen. Okay, because they lived in those nest boxes, they were a pretty easy target. And on these private farms, you don't know who's talking to who. So we had a whole group of monkeys that was just stolen. And we were heartbroken. I mean, we knew those monkeys, and so we called the federal police because, it's property and it was stolen. And the federal police came, and they agreed that they were going to investigate the crime. And they got a lead on some possible poachers and drug dealers that lived in a nearby town. And they said to my Brazilian assistant, we're going to raid the place, but you have to come along because we need to identify these monkeys positively. And I said, whoa, she can't do that because she lives in that town, and her life is going to be jeopardized if she's going to finger somebody who's living in the town. I'll go, right? Now, I'm not a gun guy, all right? I'm just not part of that culture. I'm crammed in the back of a Volkswagen Beetle police car with 2 armed officers, and behind us there was another car of 4 armed officers. And in the back seat are a lot of what I would call machine guns, I guess automatic weapons, whatever they were. And they said to me, okay, we're going to kick down the gate, and we'll call you when we want you to come in. Well, fortunately, there was no gunfire. The place was gone, abandoned. There were no monkeys, but they got a lead. And the lead came from a veterinarian in Rio de Janeiro, a woman who knew that we put indelible tattoos on the inside of the right thigh of all of our monkeys. And she got a call from a very wealthy, name-identified individual, a media magnate who lived in Rio, who said, I've got some monkeys on my property. He had wild animals before. I've got some monkeys on my, and one of them is sick. One of them's got a broken leg or something. Would you come? So she went over there, and she saw the golden lion tamarins, and she saw the tattoos. And she knew that something awful was happening. And she called the government agency. The calls finally came to us, and they said, look, he's ready to just give them back. He bought them. He was an elderly man, and he bought them for his young girlfriend who wanted to have golden lion tamarins on her property. And he's ready to give them back. And I was on a tear at this point, and I wanted to expose him. And my colleague said, look, if you expose him, you're never coming back to Brazil. You're done. You'll never get a visa again. And so they sent somebody else to get the golden lion tamarins. We got them all back except one who died of a broken leg. And believe it or not, a couple of those monkeys was stolen a second time. So that was the kind of environment that we were working in. Now the story, as I fictionalize it in the novel, is told a little different. But
But there are also the golden lion tamarins stolen out of the zoo in France.
recently,
Just recently.
very recently, yeah, there's a theft of stealing golden lion tamarins out of small zoos.
This leads into another question. As you clearly pointed out, deforestation, encroachment on habitat. What are some other things that contributed to the depletion of the species? Is there a bush trade? There clearly seems to be a pet trade that most people here in Southwest Florida, we're a hub of where everything from South America comes to go to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's two questions here, but it leads into you being a scientist and conservationist, if I can label you. Do you feel that you probably should have had more of a voice to be able to shed light on this wealthy media mogul who, if you would have said, listen, this is what they're doing, this is what money does, to educate the masses?
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer that question. I've asked myself that a number of times since this happened, and the outcome was so successful, and we went on to continue the program, and the program's alive today, and the golden lion tamarin might be extinct if we expose this guy. He had that kind of power.
But it could have sacrificed the continuation of the program.
Right. So I think, we were dealing with the devil. We made a deal with the devil for a higher goal.
Is there education in Brazil on the importance of this endangered species?
Huge. The Brazilians are very supportive now. They're
Find it as part of their legacy and their heritage.
they do.
Protect this
There's a
iconic-
golden lion tamarin on the equivalent of the $10 note.
Oh, right on.
And right now, they're considering putting the golden lion tamarin on the gold medal for the 2016 Olympics.
Fantastic.
So people are very proud now. They know about golden lion tamarins. They're not found anywhere else in the world, and they are really excited. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So therefore you said the program's still alive, so they're still tracking the tamarins and monitoring the population?
Some. We can't keep track of 3,200 of them. but we are monitoring some.
Do they still have radio coverage?
Some do, yeah, some do. So we can, count birth rates and estimate population size that way. And occasionally we're trying to connect all this habitat, but occasionally, because there is no connection, we have to take a male from one forest fragment and a female from another forest fragment, catch them, and take them to a third unoccupied forest fragment and build a new family. So that's still going on. In fact, recently, our team moved a whole group from a private ranch, all descendants of reintroduced monkeys, moved them into one of those protected reserves, and moved a wild group back to that ranch. And that ensures gene flow between the wild and the descendants of the zoo population. So we can do it.
Now the birth patterns continued, they still kept having twins, or is it the stress of the,
Nope, they had twins,
they still kept having?
and reproduction was never an issue. They know how to do it. Yeah.
If I understood your numbers correctly, in the wild 4-year program, there were only 150 individuals.
Correct. 150.
So from the familiarity that I have with the Endangered Species Act, they were extinct, or would have gone extinct without your introduction.
There is no question about it, and I wouldn't just attribute it to the reintroduction. I would attribute it to the behavioral ecology study, which created a presence in the forest, and a community education program. I didn't have time to talk about that tonight, but there was a massive community education program that recognized that every Brazilian is a stakeholder in this, and every Brazilian deserved to be compensated if they lost in any way as a result of the conservation program. Yeah.
I've read that reintroduction programs are sometimes very unsuccessful
Um, I personally have not, but I've done reviews of reintroduction programs, and I can tell you you're absolutely right. Very few are successful. Between 20 and 40% are successful. Zoo-born animals at the lower end, in some cases where you move wild-born animals from one place to another, the success rate is a little bit higher. I see Greta looking at her watch.
I know, because I want to ask a question, but I know that you're going to need to be signing. Is that correct?
Oh, no, we're keeping them for several
Okay, we're good. I wanted to ask a question about natural instinct. Obviously, wild monkeys have, or animals have this natural instinct, but how about the ones that were captive born? How much of natural instinct do they still have when they were introduced in the wild? Or just talk a little bit about natural.
Terrific question. It's sometimes difficult to sort out learned from innate behavior, but the recognition of predators seem to have the response to predators seem to have a very strong innate pattern to them. And the other thing is that they have a foraging behavior that consists of sticking their hand into any hole or crevice or rolled leaf, where I would never stick my hand in a forest, and they would feel around looking for live things. And you see that in zoos, and the wild tamarins do it as well. It seems like an innate pattern of searching for food, and the zoo tamarins brought that along with them. And of course, there's probably a lot of the sexual behavior that's innate as well.
This program was started in '83.
That's correct. Well, there was a Brazilian primatologist who actually took a strong interest in golden lion tamarins in the 70s and interceded with the Brazilian government to create the first of the reserves. His name was Adelmar Coimbra Filho. And the breeding program in zoos also started in the 60s and owes its success to a great degree in the work of Frank Dumont's father, who had 9 golden lion tamarins at Monkey Jungle and was very helpful in figuring out how to manage those animals in a zoo so that they would survive and reproduce. So the roots go back to the 60s, maybe 70s, but the real field work began in '83.
What previous reintroduction of other species did you guys maybe model yourselves on, or did you reinvent the wheel?
Looking back, I cannot imagine how arrogant I was to not really attempt.
We're getting the real answers, folks.
I promise you the backstory.
Love it.
You know, I talked to a couple of people who knew golden lion tamarins very well, and there were a couple of papers that talked a little bit about work with golden lion tamarins that escaped and how they survived. So I looked at that. But I didn't make an attempt to do a systematic survey of reintroduction until well after I started this work. We did it all by the seat of our pants. I can't believe how arrogant and unscholarly we were at that time. And as a matter of fact, if I had surveyed it, I probably wouldn't have done it because the prospects of success are so low. But you know what in our database on reintroductions of captive-born animals, the first animals were reintroduced in 1916 in the United States. You know what they were? Bison. The huge herds of bison in the American West right now are largely the result of reintroduction of bison that were born in the Bronx Zoo in New York. I didn't know that at the time.
What made you want to do this?
Oh, great question. And you should ask Beata that question too. We both worked in a
Is
zoo.
this where it's going to go into the insanity plea?
We both worked in zoos. We both worked with golden lion tamarins. We were both infatuated with these animals, and we saw a shot to really contribute to conservation. And we also saw the opportunity for an adventure of a lifetime. And so we went together to do this, and we lived in that little tent in the forest, and it was an adventure of a lifetime.
Maybe the primates modeled some of your behaviors.
Ooh, well, we're not going to go there. But one good one. No, that's fine. It's the wine talking. But the one thing that was always vexed her was when we were in the tent. You know, there was a lot of mosquitoes, and you had to get in the tent fast. I was not good at getting in a tent. I always got the tent caught in my pants in the back, and then by the time I untangled myself, it was full of mosquitoes. So, I saw another hand go up somewhere. No?
Oh, no, I was waiting.
Somebody arrived late.
All right. Well, I'm happy to talk afterward. You can talk to Beata. She's in the back of the room. Yeah.
You do have another book to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, oh, that's a good idea, Greta. Thank you. 2 years after I published 13 Gold Monkeys, I decided to write a second novel based on some experience I had with chimpanzees in Rwanda. Based on experience I had with chimpanzees in Rwanda, working on the conservation of a very small population in western Rwanda. Chimpanzees are a whole different ballgame. Golden lion tamarins I liken to little precision Swiss watches. They really are, you know, but apes are very cognitively deep, and so deep that some people consider us and chimpanzees to be both apes. So Ape is a thriller. It's about a kidnapping engineered by a chimpanzee, and it explores relationships, this cognitive relationship between humans and chimpanzees, and what that might mean for our own ethical systems.
It's based on your experience working in Rwanda, establishing a national park for chimpanzees.
Yep. Yep.
And you assisted with that through?
I did. Just last week, a place that we worked on since 2007, a little forest reserve, was gazetted as a national park, and I was able to, I can say that, again, worked with a great team of people, just like in Brazil. Great teams of people. It's a cooperative effort, and we pulled it off. That was our goal in 2007, and it just happened last week.
Fantastic.
So we are so proud of that. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. Well, I'll sit over there, and if anybody is interested in,
No, sit right here next to this beautiful girl.
well, I've got to sign books. Is the problem? They're going to throw us out of here. How was that? Okay. Okay. This is a little bit tricky.
Folks, we do have both of Dr. Beck's books behind the registers here for sale. On behalf of Books and Books, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us. For those of you online, thank you for tuning in. Dr. Beck will be signing here. And thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for Dr. Beck in this wonderful event? Thank you so much.